This is the daily outlook for Wednesday, July 1st. There's obviously a new quarter of new month, so we can do a quick analysis of the higher time frame trend. Price comes from expansion to consolidation. Right, we had a classic buy, swing to Z. Right, but now this swing to Z is the swing to Z is closing in bullish order flow here, right? You can see that near its closure, it's likely going to create a fair value gap here. Also created a change in the state of delivery, right? Broke through an intermediate term high. So obviously we can anticipate that early on in the month we will see an expansion higher. Now, because price comes from expansion to consolidation, if price will be really bullish, I mean, overall, if you take out the PDs of the range and you look at price, right, what is price doing? It created an intermediate term low here by rebalancing in a weekly inefficiency, and overall it's creating bullish order blocks at 25% of the range and is respecting them. You can see the intermediate term low here, clean highs. That's why I do believe that this can be an expansion month. If not, then it could consolidate. It all depends on what it does at the highs, right? Does it create a fair value gap through the highs, or does it create a wick above the highs? If it does create a wick, then you can anticipate a consolidation monthly profile, or a sell monthly profile, or a reversal monthly profile. But the way it's setting up right now, I mean, it's probably going to be something like this. Obviously, you could trade to the highs and fail, but this is what I preferably would want to trade, right? This is what will lead to good daily profiles, good weekly profiles. Okay, so we know on the higher time frame that price comes from expansion to consolidation, so very likely we'll keep trading higher from these levels. Maybe we can look at some higher time frame standard deviations. Right, you can see that there's a target, clean target at 32,000. Right, so this can be an objective for this month. If you start seeing bullish daily profiles, bullish weekly profiles, I'd even say not only from a day trading perspective, but also from either a one shot, one kill, or overall, it can be a swing trade, okay, towards these objectives. And then this may be more relevant to the yearly profile. I wouldn't say, well, everything's possible, but I do think that it will trade somewhere around this range, at least 32,000 to 33. And then for the yearly profile, we could be looking at a range until 36 to 37,000. Okay, so we looked at narrative. Why should price keep going higher? Again, it could trade higher and fail also, right? It's obviously a possibility. But until it happens, right, you have to stay bullish. If we look at the current range that we're in, I can look at it from a weekly chart. Price has been consolidating for quite a while inside of this range. So overall, it formed an intermediate term low inside of a fair value gap. In premium, there's a range of a rejection block. Price failed at 50% twice. And right in between these levels, there's a volume imbalance. Right, and you can see that these levels tend to create intermediate term highs here. Right now, price was inside of a range, So obviously it's going to break one high, fail, right? But I mean, you can anticipate swing points, right? Daily swing points to be created around these levels. That's the idea. And inside of this range, they basically all happen to be intermediate term lows. There's an intermediate term low, right? Intermediate term low. Here we have an intermediate term high, intermediate term high. Here we had an intermediate term high, right? And now price has displaced above this intermediate term high. And so very likely we'll keep trading higher from these levels. Okay, so we can anticipate. I mean, if it's good on the weekly profile, if it's going to reverse, it's going to be today. Right, it's gonna trade here and then fail. But if not, we're very likely looking at a classic buy week, because both Monday and Tuesday were expansion. Right, so if price is going to trade inside of premium and fail, I mean, it's likely not going to do that on a Thursday when price comes from 3 expansions. It's likely going to consolidate at that point. Right, today being Tuesday, I do think that if price will trade lower, well, I mean, what I mean by trading lower is, by first trading higher to then lower. But on an intraday basis, if it trades lower first, that's good trading opportunities, right? Okay, we can look at some lower time frame charts. You can see that this was a SIBI right at 75 in premium of the range. There was a breaker right through it. There was an intermediate term high. Price has displaced this range, so created a fair value gap, which so far is proven as a breakaway gap. Right, so price has claimed the range here. Right, it didn't trade above it, wick, or consolidate. It expanded through the range. So drawn liquidity is obviously the highs, I do believe. I do think that any retracements in the range, especially if it comes back to the intermediate term high, I do believe is going to be pushed back higher. And here you can see the fair value gap that created the low of the previous day. Asia trades at 25% of it and then expands. There's also a fair value gap here, right? This is a fair value gap which was reclaimed. And this may be more relevant, say, if you're trading Asia right now, right? So you can see that so far Asia is choppy around these levels. So, and Asia opens in premium from an expansion. Maybe that's not the best opportunity. So that maybe these levels are more relevant to either current trading conditions or it could be relevant also for New York, right? If for some reason price is trading around this range, right? You want to see if it's claiming this range or if it's respecting this range. But overall, I do prefer this fair value gap since it cuts right through the quadrant. It has an intermediate term high. It has a breaker, which is now a bullish reclaimed order block, right? So I do think that these are very strong levels that and price should expand from here. I mean, I believe that price was going to trade in here and be high resistance, but it proved me completely wrong, right? This was clearly an expansion through the range, and this obviously provides good trading opportunities here, right? Because these are 2 daily expansion profiles. So this is good. So this is likely telling us that price comes from an expansion. What will it do? It could consolidate, or it could retrace to expand. But if it would reverse, it would need to trade higher first to then trade lower. I do think that's the idea. There's too much in the range here for me to believe that this is a shakeout and price will come lower from this range, because overall the market, as we can see, is holding the order block of the intermediate term low, which is this candle, right? This is this candle on the 4 hour. I look at how it's trading at the upper quadrant of it. It's never able to even get to 50%. So very bullish price action. We could look at a 3-day look back. Price comes from an expansion to a consolidation. All right, we then anticipated price to keep on trading lower. Why? Because price comes from expansion to consolidation. Price does so here. Right, this is on Monday. This was the expansion anticipated lower, but ends up being a shakeout. Right, it ends up creating a divergence at what is now the weekly low, right, with the S&P 500, and then expands away from these levels. So expansion, consolidation, expansion, reversal, right? In fact, this is a New York reversal profile. And then yesterday had a range to expansion profile. And you can see that this range here is right around 50% of this range. Right, price in Asia opened in a consolidation, traded lower to a fair value, right, to that 4-hour fair value gap from the previous day, expanded higher, reaccumulated in the range, and then 9:30 opened and traded away. Okay, so this range left us an important PDRA for sure. Let's look at it maybe on a 15-minute chart. We have a large bullish order block inside of the range here. Right, it happens through, it forms from, it trades to 25% and then rejects right on the lower time frames and then breaks the structure again. We have the highs. There's a fair value gap located right at 25% through the swing high, so this being a mitigation block here. Right, so I do think that this fair value gap should be important for order flow. So here in discount, well, not in discount, but near 50%, right? So 25 to 50%, we have an order block. So you could use this order block. Personally, there's a fair value gap that I prefer. Maybe it's a bit too refined, but I do think it's pretty valid, which is the 1-minute fair value gap from the 951 candle, because that's the one that cuts right through the intermediate term high here, right? And it was never revisited, and it also happens to be right at 50% of the daily range. Overall, it's basically the upper half of the discount fair value gap, right? So these levels should be sensitive. And if not in discount, right, you got another fair value gap here. So very likely daily high, daily low will form around these levels. Obviously, you got to watch out for divergences formed around this high, because price comes from an expansion to consolidation, right? It can do this, but the lower it first trades, I do think that this is going to provide better trading opportunities for New York as a reversal, right? If this is from the open is going to trade lower, right, and then start trading back in the range, New York opens around these levels, I think that's going to offer a good daily profile for continuation. Okay, so fair value gap 25%. Right, so relevant for what? Maybe not so relevant for the daily profile. It can be, if that price does this. I do believe it might dip a bit lower, right? Say maybe to the order block, if not back to 50%. And then I would anticipate a New York reversal. But it definitely can be. It does this if it will be really bullish. Maybe we can put some standard deviations on this range. right? Price, okay, so what happened at the close yesterday? Now, overall, this, in my opinion, is a consolidation phase, but you can see that the 2 p.m. power of 3, right? So it was an expansion to reversal, right? It first expanded higher above the range, but then, mid candle it reverses. So here, so essentially this is a reversal profile here, right? This is what price comes from here in Asia. So because of that, I do think that it can revisit, say here or here, right? Ideally this one, but again, it definitely can be. It does this. Okay, this type of trade can also lead to a consolidation day. Obviously, if everything's possible, today does this, right? Then you got relative equal lows inside of, well, this is the previous day's low here, and then past that, then I do believe we're targeting a new weekly low. I think that if price breaks all of these levels, then we'll be trading lower. Okay, so daily chart, we saw the break above an intermediate term high. Price keeps respecting daily bullish order blocks. Overall, price is inside of a range, but it now comes from a change in state of delivery. Right, it also reclaimed a weekly and a daily volume imbalance. So I do believe that price will keep trading lower. We'll seek premium targets. Could trade back inside the rejection block. Could displace above the rejection block. But no matter what, should trade higher. For hour, we want to see if price is able to come back inside of this inefficiency. Right, you got an intermediate term high at this fair value gap. You got a breaker at this fair value gap, which is now a reclaimed bullish order block. Right, this range right here. Overall, again, you got very relative equal highs. If I do think that if price displaces this fair value gap, well, it's definitely going to trade to this one, right? If price breaks 50% of this, it's going to want to seek a discount target. Anyways, many scenarios possible, obviously, but I do think that overall, keep these lows on your chart. Keep in mind the levels of the higher time frame, right? As price is trading inside of the inefficiency, is it trading around, say, this fair value gap or the discount fair value gap? At what time of day is it doing so, right? Or is price trading already as an expansion from the fair value gap at 25%, right? That can be possible. Obviously, you just have to wait in time. But again, best scenario is an expansion profile, either from this fair value gap, if not from the one at 50%. If not, just pay attention to the reaction at the highs, right? If, say, price will trade here, but then fail at the highs, this could lead to a consolidation day. Or if this happens in New York, then a New York reversal profile. Okay, so keep these levels, pay attention to the higher time frame, and good luck at trading.